Have you ever looked across the room at the person you've shared your life with and felt something quietly change? The same face, the same voice, yet somehow a little more distant. You still care, but the closeness that once felt effortless now takes effort. Many older couples experience this, though few ever speak of it. A husband may wake one morning and realize he no longer feels the same spark. A wife may sense it too, the silence, the smaller conversations, the gentle drift apart. But this isn't about losing love. It's about how love transforms as the years unfold. I'm Dr. Michael Carter, and today we're going to walk gently into a truth many couples quietly live with: why some husbands begin to feel distant from their wives as they grow older, and how that distance can be healed. We'll talk about 7 quiet reasons behind this change, from fading attraction and unspoken hurt to loneliness, aging, and the longing to feel seen again. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, your city and country. I read every comment, and it warms my heart to know where our community gathers. And if this topic speaks to you, please subscribe so we can keep exploring the tender, honest sides of love together. Because sometimes one moment of understanding can save years of silence. Reason 1: the fading bridge of physical attraction. When Daniel turned 72, he noticed something he could hardly admit, not to his wife, not even to himself. "I still love her," he told me, "but I don't feel that closeness anymore. I don't know how to explain it." It's a confession many older men quietly carry. They don't stop loving their wives. They simply begin to feel like strangers to their own bodies. Their energy shifts. Their reflection in the mirror feels unfamiliar. The man who once felt strong and certain now hesitates, unsure of what his partner still sees in him. Biology plays a quiet but powerful role here. As men age, their hormone levels, especially testosterone, naturally decline. This affects not just desire, but also mood, energy, and confidence. The body slows, the heart tires more easily, and even small aches whisper, "You're not the same." Society rarely teaches men how to speak about these changes. So instead of talking, they retreat. They grow silent, hoping the distance will hurt less if they don't name it. For many couples, the fading of physical attraction feels like a sign that love is ending. But it's not. It's a shift from passion to tenderness, from touch to presence. The spark changes shape, yet warmth can remain if we learn to see it differently. Physical closeness in later years doesn't depend only on the body. It depends on kindness, laughter, and the feeling of being accepted exactly as we are. When one partner feels unseen, a simple gesture can do more than a grand act. A soft hand on the shoulder, a gentle word, a look that says, "You still matter to me." Science also shows that gentle movement and touch can reawaken both physical and emotional connection. A short evening walk together, even 10 minutes, releases endorphins, the same chemicals that create feelings of affection and calm. A shared meal, a small compliment, a moment of gratitude. These are the new bridges where intimacy lives. Daniel decided to start with something small. Each morning, instead of sitting in silence at breakfast, he reached for his wife's hand before they prayed. At first, she looked surprised. Then she smiled. It didn't fix everything overnight, but it reminded them both that closeness is something you build, not something that disappears. If you've ever felt a quiet distance growing between you and your partner, know that it doesn't mean love has faded. It may only mean it's waiting to take on a gentler form. We are not our younger bodies. We are the stories they carried, the laughter, the hardships, the memories that built a shared life. Love after 60 is less about sparks and more about light, steady, calm, and warm. The kind of light that keeps you company in the quiet hours, that forgives small things, that stays even when passion softens. So if you notice yourself or your partner pulling away, don't rush to fix what you think is broken. Instead, begin with a small act of presence, a touch, a shared cup of tea, a walk in the soft evening sun. These little rituals help the heart remember what the body sometimes forgets: that connection is still possible even after years of silence. If this reflection resonates with you, leave a comment with the number 1 below. You might be surprised how many others feel the same quiet ache, and how many still believe in rebuilding closeness, one gentle gesture at a time. Because even when attraction fades, love can still glow softer, but no less real. Reason 2. The weight of unspoken conflicts. Michael, 70 years old, once told me something that stayed with me. He said, I stopped arguing with my wife years ago, not because we stopped disagreeing, but because I stopped believing it mattered. At first glance, that might sound peaceful. No arguments, no raised voices. But silence isn't always harmony. Sometimes it's the sound of two people slowly retreating into their own corners. Many older men live inside this kind of quiet withdrawal. They carry their hurt privately, often for years, because they were never taught how to express pain. As boys, they were told to be strong, to stay composed, to never cry. So when disappointment or criticism appears in marriage, their instinct is not to speak, but to endure. Psychologists call this emotional shutdown. It's not a refusal to care. It's a defense. When a man feels unheard or dismissed, he often decides it's safer to stay silent than to risk more rejection. That silence can feel like distance, and over time it becomes a wall that separates two people who once shared everything. In long marriages, the wounds are rarely dramatic. They're small, a sharp comment, a forgotten thank you, an unanswered question. Each one alone is nothing, but together they become heavy. And when a man doesn't know how to name that weight, he simply carries it until the load feels too heavy to move toward closeness again. But here's the truth: silence may protect the heart for a while, yet it also starves it. No one can feel love through walls. Love breathes through words, even simple ones like, "That hurt me," or "Can we talk about this?" Michael's story didn't end in silence. One day his wife noticed his quietness and asked softly, "When did we stop talking?" It wasn't a complaint. It was a doorway. That night they sat on the porch, both unsure where to begin. But he said the only thing he could: "I've been afraid to tell you how tired I felt." It was clumsy, but it was honest, and that honesty began to heal what years of politeness had hidden. From a psychological view, expression doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. The act of speaking even one sentence of truth breaks the illusion that nothing can change. When couples find courage to talk again, they often discover that beneath anger lies sadness, and beneath sadness lies longing. If you've ever lived beside someone who has grown quiet, try this. Don't demand words, invite them. Ask gently, "How are you really doing?" Sit in the silence that follows without rushing to fill it. Sometimes the space itself gives permission for the heart to open. And if you're the one who has gone quiet, remember, strength isn't measured by how much you can hold in. True strength is the willingness to be seen, to say, "This hurts," and to trust that love will not collapse under honesty. Michael once told me, months later, "We still disagree sometimes, but now we talk. And when we talk, I feel like her husband again, not her shadow." If these words echo in your own life, leave a comment with the number 2 below. You might help someone else realize that silence is not peace, it's just a pause before the next conversation. Because love at any age doesn't need perfection. It only needs two people willing to speak again. Reason 3, familiarity turning into emotional loneliness. Thomas, 76, once said something quietly heartbreaking. "We're still together," he told me. "We share the same house, the same dinner table, even the same bed. But it feels like we live in different worlds." That kind of loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from living beside someone who no longer feels emotionally close. Many older couples know this feeling, sitting together in the evening, the television murmuring, the clock ticking, but no real conversation left. It doesn't happen overnight. It's the slow fade of connection, almost invisible at first. The jokes that once made them laugh go untold. The questions stop. The curiosity disappears. What remains is routine, efficient, polite, predictable. A marriage that functions but no longer breathes. Psychologists call this emotional detachment through familiarity. After decades together, the brain starts to treat the partner like a background sound, always there, rarely noticed. What once brought comfort begins to blur into invisibility. And when life becomes too familiar, the heart quietly hungers for aliveness again, to be seen, to be surprised, to feel something new. That hunger, if left unspoken, turns into loneliness. Not the loneliness of being forgotten, but the ache of not being understood by the one sitting inches away. But here's the truth, emotional loneliness doesn't mean love has ended. It simply means love needs new language. The same faces, the same walls, but different ways of reaching across them. I once told Thomas, the opposite of loneliness isn't company, it's connection. He nodded and smiled sadly. So we began small. I asked him to recall something he admired about his wife when they first met. The next evening, instead of sitting in silence, he told her that story. Do you remember that blue dress you wore at the summer fair? He said. You looked so alive. She looked up surprised, then laughed softly. That small spark became a conversation, and that conversation became warmth. Science backs this up. Studies show that shared memories, even brief recollections, activate the same regions of the brain that spark emotional closeness. The act of remembering together can rebuild a bridge that routine has worn down. If you've noticed silence stretching between you and someone you love, try this gentle practice once a day. Bring up one memory that made you both smile. Don't analyze it. Don't explain it. Just remember it out loud. The brain can't tell the difference between past and present affection. It only feels connection. Thomas later told me we didn't change much. We just started seeing each other again. That's the essence of healing emotional loneliness, not adding more noise, but restoring attention. If you've ever felt the ache of being unseen in your own home, you're not alone. Leave a comment with the number 3 below. Your voice might remind someone else that love can grow quiet, but it doesn't have to disappear. Because familiarity isn't the end of love. It's the moment love asks to be rediscovered. Reason 4, the midlife storm inside. Richard was 68 when he told me I wake up each morning next to my wife and I wonder, is this the life I chose or just the one that happened to me? His voice wasn't bitter. It was tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying too many unspoken questions. For many men somewhere between retirement and the quiet years after 60, a storm begins to rise not outside but within. It's not about their wife or their health or even age. It's about meaning. They start to ask, have I done enough? Have I lived the life I wanted? What's left for me now? This is what psychologists call a midlife crisis. Though the word crisis can be misleading, it's not madness. It's awakening a sudden awareness that time feels shorter and the future no longer stretches endlessly ahead. The man who once defined himself by work achievement or providing for his family now faces a blank page, and that emptiness can feel terrifying. When men don't know how to face these feelings, they often project them outward. The wife becomes a mirror of everything they fear. Routine aging, loss of youth. She isn't the problem, but she becomes a symbol of a life that feels too still. That's when irritability, restlessness, or emotional withdrawal start to appear. Richard described it perfectly. I looked at her, and instead of seeing the woman I loved, I saw all the years I couldn't get back. He didn't need a new partner. He needed a new sense of purpose. The truth is, every stage of life invites renewal, even the later ones. The crisis comes not because life is ending, but because it's asking to begin again in a different way. What men often long for in this phase isn't youth, it's vitality. The feeling that they still matter, still have something to give. One gentle practice I often suggest is reflection with movement. Go for a walk alone or with your spouse and ask out loud, what makes me feel alive these days? Write down whatever answers come, even if they feel small. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It can be tending a garden, mentoring a neighbor, learning something new, or rediscovering music you once loved. Richard took this to heart. He and his wife started volunteering once a week at a local library. At first, he said it felt meaningless. But one afternoon, a young boy asked him for help finding a book about trains. That small moment, he told me, made me feel useful again. And when he returned home, he looked at his wife differently, not as a reminder of time lost, but as someone to share his new time with. If you've ever felt this quiet storm inside, that strange pull between gratitude and restlessness, know that it's not a failure. It's your spirit reminding you that life isn't done with you yet. Leave a comment with the number 4 below if this resonates. Your story might help another man realize he's not alone in his questions. Because midlife isn't the end of love or purpose. It's the season where both ask to be renewed, not by changing who you're with, but by remembering who you still are. Reason 5, when lifestyles and values no longer align. James was 73 when he told me I still love my wife, but it feels like we live on different planets. He laughed softly after saying it, but his eyes didn't follow. They looked tired not from age, but from trying to hold on to a connection that no longer felt mutual. It's a quiet truth many couples face in later life. They've shared decades of memories, raised children, built a home. Yet somewhere along the way, the rhythm that once moved together began to shift. She finds joy in quiet mornings and books. He longs for travel and conversation. She looks forward to visits from the grandchildren. He dreams of seeing the sea again. Both still care, but they no longer meet in the middle. Psychologists call this divergent evolution, when two people grow, but in different directions. It's natural. Aging changes what we value, how we see time, what brings meaning. The danger comes when partners stop updating each other about who they're becoming. They assume they already know, but decades can turn even familiarity into distance. James once said, "It's strange we talk every day, but I don't think she really knows me anymore." That sentence holds the quiet grief of many long marriages. The love remains, but the shared story has paused. If this sounds familiar, here's the good news: growing apart doesn't have to mean growing away. The key isn't to erase differences, it's to stay curious about them. When two people stop being interested in each other's worlds, love starts to fade. But when they keep asking, "Who are you becoming now?" love finds new language. I suggested a small ritual for James and his wife, a weekly listening walk. Each Sunday, they would stroll for 20 minutes, and one person would simply share something new, a thought, a dream, even a complaint. The other could only listen. No fixing, no advice, just presence. At first, he said it felt awkward, but after a few weeks, those walks became moments of rediscovery. I didn't realize how much she still cared about the little things he told me. I had stopped asking. That realization changed the energy in their home, not dramatically, but gently, like sunlight returning through a window that had been closed too long. Science supports this practice. Studies show that active listening without interruption or judgment triggers oxytocin, the same hormone that deepens empathy and emotional closeness. It reminds the brain, this person is safe. This person still matters. If you've noticed your relationship drifting into parallel lives, start small. Ask one new question this week. What's been on your mind lately? What do you wish we did more often? Listen with patience, even if the answers surprise you. Connection is not built on agreement, it's built on attention. James later told me, "We still have our differences, but now I feel like we're walking in the same direction again." If this reflection speaks to your experience, leave a comment with the number 5 below. Your words might remind another couple that distance doesn't mean the end. It can be an invitation to rediscover the person they once promised to walk beside. Because love at its best isn't about sameness. It's about staying curious even after a lifetime together. Reason 6, when financial stress and retirement worries quietly break the bond. Henry was 71 when he whispered to me, "I thought retirement would bring peace, but instead it feels like I've disappeared." He had worked for over 40 years, steady, proud, dependable. His life had rhythm: wake early, work hard, provide. But once the paycheck stopped coming, the rhythm did too. What remained was silence and the quiet question many men carry but never speak. Who am I if I'm no longer providing? Retirement can be a tender and confusing chapter. The world may see it as rest, but for many men, it feels like loss of purpose, identity, and value. Society often measures a man by what he earns or builds. When that role fades, so can his sense of worth. Henry told me that when his wife asked simple questions like, "Should we plan the budget differently this month?" he heard them as judgment. "I know she didn't mean it that way," he said, "but I felt like I'd failed her." That's how emotional distance begins, not with anger, but with quiet shame. Psychologists call this the post-career identity crisis. After decades of being needed, a man suddenly wonders if he still matters. The loss of status can affect confidence, energy, even affection. And because men are taught not to show insecurity, they go silent, which only widens the gap. But here's what many couples forget: financial security and emotional security are not the same. One can fade, but the other can still grow stronger. What most men need in this stage isn't more money, it's reassurance that they're still respected, still trusted, still seen as capable and loved. Henry's wife learned this gently. One morning, instead of talking about bills, she asked, "What do you miss most about working?" He paused, then smiled for the first time in weeks. "I miss feeling useful." That small question opened a deeper truth: he didn't need to earn again. He just needed to contribute. So they created small projects together. He began fixing things around the neighborhood: broken mailboxes, old fences. She started baking for local families. They didn't do it for money. They did it for meaning. Within months, Henry's energy returned. "I feel like myself again," he told me. And somehow we feel like us again. Science supports this. Research shows that purpose-based activities, even unpaid ones, lower anxiety, regulate mood, and improve marital satisfaction in retired couples. Purpose doesn't have to look like success. It only needs to feel like contribution. If you or your partner are in this stage, try a small shift. Replace financial talk with emotional talk once a week. Instead of asking, "How much do we have left?" ask, "What do we still want to do together?" These questions remind both of you that life is still unfolding, not closing. Henry often ends our calls with a gentle laugh. "I don't feel invisible anymore," he says. "I might not earn a paycheck, but I still earn her smile." If you've ever felt that quiet fear of not being enough, leave a comment with the number 6 below. Your story might help another person feel seen. Because love in later life isn't about what we can provide, it's about how we keep showing up when everything else has changed. Reason 7: when physical intimacy fades and a husband no longer feels desired. George was 74 when he said quietly, "I don't blame my wife. We're both getting older. But it's been years since she reached for my hand." His eyes filled with something that wasn't anger, it was grief. Not for the loss of passion, but for the loss of being seen. Many men in their later years carry this sadness in silence. They still want to feel close, but they no longer know how to ask. The warmth that once came so naturally now feels uncertain, awkward, and every time they hesitate, the distance grows a little wider. This isn't vanity or selfishness, it's biology mixed with vulnerability. As men age, testosterone levels drop, blood flow changes, and medications for blood pressure or diabetes can affect desire. But the deepest pain doesn't come from the body. It comes from the belief that they are no longer wanted. When a man stops feeling desired, he begins to question his worth. Women too experience their own changes: hormonal shifts, fatigue, emotional stress. Often both partners assume the other has lost interest, when in truth both are quietly waiting for the other to reach out first. Over time, the silence turns into self-protection. He stops trying, afraid of rejection. She stays distant, unsure if he still cares. And a space that was once tender becomes guarded. Psychologists call this emotional self-protection, the instinct to retreat before we're turned away. It's not rejection, it's fear disguised as calm. But love cannot breathe in fear. It needs warmth, reassurance, and small gestures that say, "You still matter to me." George told me he missed the smallest things: the goodnight kiss, her hand brushing his arm as she passed. So I asked him, "When was the last time you reached for her hand?" He paused. I stopped because she didn't respond. I smiled gently and said, "Then maybe she's waiting for you to try again." That night he did. He reached across the couch while they were watching television. She looked surprised but didn't pull away. It wasn't a grand moment. No music, no perfect timing, just two hands resting together after years of distance. "It felt like home," he said. Science tells us that physical touch, even simple contact like holding hands, releases oxytocin, the hormone of trust and connection. It lowers blood pressure, eases anxiety, and rekindles emotional warmth. In later life, affection doesn't need to be sexual to be intimate. It only needs to be intentional. If you've noticed that physical closeness has faded, start small. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a goodnight hug, a whisper like, "I'm glad you're here." These are the threads that weave intimacy back into daily life. George once shared, "It's not about being young again. It's about feeling seen. And that, I believe, is what every heart longs for, to be noticed, cherished, still chosen, even as the years pass. If this reflection touches something in you, leave a comment with the number 7 below. You might remind someone else that love doesn't vanish with age, it only waits for courage to reach out again. Because love doesn't have to shout, it only has to stay close, quiet, real, and alive. Conclusion. Rediscovering love after the years. When a husband says he no longer feels close to his wife, it doesn't always mean the love is gone. More often, that love is simply buried beneath years of stress, silence, small misunderstandings, and the quiet fear of change. I've met many couples who thought their connection had faded for good, only to discover it was still there, waiting under layers of habit and time. Love in later life doesn't vanish. It transforms. It asks for gentler eyes, slower words, and smaller acts of care. Psychologists remind us that emotional distance is not an ending, but an invitation, a call to rebuild. The years that tested us can also teach us. Every wrinkle carries a story of survival. Every silence holds the chance to listen again. So if you're in that quiet space where the laughter has grown thin and the touch feels rare, take heart. You can begin again. Start with one word, one glance, one gesture that says, I still choose you. Because love doesn't live in the past or some faraway future. It lives in this moment, in the choices we make today, to stay kind, to stay curious, to stay connected. If this message touched something inside you, I'd love to hear your story. How have your feelings changed over the years in your marriage? What's been the hardest part, and what has helped you hold on? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words may be the light someone else needs tonight. And if this conversation felt meaningful, please like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Life in Words, where we explore the emotions, lessons, and quiet strength that carry us through life after 60. Because we can't turn back time, but we can always begin again, with a hug, with a word, with love.